One of the things that's been on my mind recently whenever it comes to World of Warcraft is, without a shadow of a doubt, dungeons. For those of you that are not aware, dungeons is one of my favorite activities whenever it comes to World of Warcraft. It's been the case pretty much since the very first time that I set foot in Deadmines, all the way back during Vanilla. Now, the first character that I ever made in the game was actually a Dwarven Hunter. Now, the fact that it is a dwarf shouldn't really be a surprise to anyone that follows me, because I'm always talking about dwarves, stuff like that, and I have like a 2,000 points, actually more than 2,000 points. I probably have like 3,000 points of units in, a Dwarven Warhammer miniature army, which I really like. I just like the fantasy of the Dwarven race. I think they look really cool. And, I even like their backstory. I remember reading a lot of quests about their backstory, the Curse of the Flesh, and all of this stuff during Wrath of the Lich King, which those were the good old days, man. But anyways, always been a fan of dwarves, so to me, like, just starting up as a dwarf hunter seemed like the most logical thing, because I also like the idea of, having like basically what looks like a shotgun. It's like a blunderbuss, right? Back in the day when you started as a dwarven hunter, you'd have a blunderbuss. I don't know if that's still the case. And then you could tame like a bear, and you'd have a bear as your companion. I thought that was pretty cool. But as it turns out, eventually I came up on this website called WoW Census, and I realized, wow, looks like a lot of people like that as well, because like 80% of the population of World of Warcraft, or something of that nature, was playing a hunter of some description. Not all of them dwarves, but usually I think there were more night elves or something like that. Night elf hunter was the big thing, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. It's been a long, long time, right? But I was playing a dwarf hunter, and then I get into an instance, and I realize, man, I really like this instance thing, right? I'm doing this instance. It was Deadmines, and I was thinking to myself, what would be cool? If I was playing a role that was more needed to the party. Now, with World of Warcraft being my first Holy Trinity MMO, because the other MMOs that I played before was stuff like Ultima Online. I think I played some Guild Wars as well. And, Diablo 2 was kind of an MMO. It wasn't really an MMO, but if you look at the current iteration of World of Warcraft, Ouroboros is basically like the old chat channels that we had for Diablo 2, kind of, right? And then you get people together and you go do activities and whatnot. So it's not that different if you really think about it. But anyways, let's not get into, these tiny little details. But those were the games that I played, so I never really experimented with a Holy Trinity. So I'm playing a Dwarven Hunter, who's a DPS class, and I'm thinking to myself, I should play something that's more needed for a party if I want to do these dungeons a whole lot. So I re-rolled into a Dwarf Priest. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the healer. Nobody wants to be the healer, clearly, so I should just play the healer, and it's going to be like the most needed role ever. And then I went into a dungeon, and I had like the worst tank imaginable. It was this gnome warrior, and he was terrible. He had no idea what he was doing. He was pulling things wrong. He was pulling like not enough, and he was just basically sandbagging the whole dungeon run. And that's when I was like, you know what? I think the tank might end up being a little bit more important than the healer, so I should probably play a tank. So I go and I start up a dwarf warrior, which, by the way, is the same warrior that you see right here. This was created back in the vanilla days. I think in my case was like 2000. It was 2007 or 2006. It was somewhere around there. It was like one year or maybe a couple of months before the Burning Crusade came out. But I created Dwarven Warrior, and it's the one that you guys are watching on screen right now. Now the dungeon that you guys are watching is actually Tol de Gore from Battle for Azeroth. This was a Tol de Gore Mythic Plus 7 or something like that, because this was just like decently looking footage that I had of a World of Warcraft instance, because this is actually a bad example for what I wanted to talk about when it comes to the fantasy of doing an instance and whatnot. But just know that this is the same dwarf. So I started playing that dwarf, and I was like, I love this class. One of my favorite things ever was charge. Charge is amazing. You just run to your target, and your target gets stunned by a little bit, but just the fact that you just run, zoom, which really emphasizes something that I've talked about in the podcast in the past, and about dragon riding and all that, how traversal is important, because I'd be using charge to do all kinds of traversal. You could jump off a cliff, charge into a monster, stuff like that, survive. Or if you guys remember Warsong Gulch, there used to be a bug a long, long time ago. I don't know if that's still a thing or not, because it's been a long time since I've done that, but like if you were in the room with a flag, and somebody would show up upstairs in like the little you know, little, it's not really a balcony, but it's kind of like an elevated position. You know, you could charge them and your character would like run up the stairs. It was hilarious back in the day. Anyway, that's enough nostalgia. So the point that I'm trying to make, right, is that I've played a lot of instances, and Mythic Plus is one of my favorite activities in World of Warcraft, but not necessarily because of the nature of Mythic Plus, because there's actually quite a few things that I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to Mythic Plus, like the timer. I realize for a lot of people, the timer is something that they love, and they, you know, oh, it's really competitive. It's like a big deal, you know, dealing with the timer and figuring out how many things you got to pull and do all of this stuff. I just like it because it's the more advanced form of dungeons, right? It's as hard as dungeons can get is Mythic Plus. I just want a challenging dungeon, ultimately. But as you guys can see here, what are we doing in this particular dungeon run, which is something that you end up doing in most Mythic Plus runs, or in most dungeon runs, period. You just pull as much as your group can possibly handle. You tank it all, and you AoE everything down as fast as you possibly can. That is the reality of dungeons nowadays, and I don't expect that this video is going to be something that is going to get like Blizzard to change their minds. I hold no lofty ambitions or anything like that. I just want to discuss the fantasy of dungeons with everyone, just to kind of like get an idea of how people feel about dungeons and how people would feel about dungeons if they were to change a little bit more to the way they were in the past. Now, I understand that this is not going to be a popular idea. A lot of people are going to be like, no, when I get into a dungeon, I want to get in, and I want to get out, and I want to be done. Which is weird for me because, to me, like I said, dungeons are kind of like the highlight of my experience whenever it comes to World of Warcraft, right? Like, sure, I like, you know, going into the open world, doing random stuff, depending on the expansion. In Shadowlands, it was terrible. I actually had more fun in Battle for Azeroth. You know, just like reminding myself of the stuff that I've done in Battle for Azeroth. I had more fun in Battle for Azeroth than I had in Shadowlands, which is, I think I actually played more Battle for Azeroth than Shadowlands for sure. But on top of it, you know, the reason I eventually stopped playing Shadowlands is because I was having really bad RNG on the Mythic Plus chest. So that's just the problem with loot, and I've talked about it at length, and I don't want to get into that. I want to talk about dungeons themselves. Now, as I was saying, if you pay attention to what we're doing in this dungeon, we're just running through, trying to be as fast and as efficient as possible, grabbing, you know, as many mobs as I feel the group can handle, and just burning them down as fast as we possibly can, as safe as we possibly can, while still trying to keep somewhat of a decent pace in the instance itself in order to be able to keep up with the timer, which you guys can't see. It's off screen to the right side. Right? That is what a dungeon is nowadays. That is what a dungeon has been. I kind of feel like since Wrath of the Lich King, but I didn't play throughout the whole time after Wrath of the Lich King, so I don't know if that has always been the case, but it's definitely been the case for the occasions that I've played, like in Legion and Warlords and all of that. There's very rarely been the need to ever really apply CC or do any kind of preparation for the dungeon. I mean, sure, I think that during, which expansion was it? Was it BFA? Might have been BFA, I don't remember. I think it might have been BFA. During BFA, there was the whole thing where you'd have the rogues do the AoE cloak thing and whatnot, and that was like a strategy people would use to skip certain mobs and whatnot, and rogues became like a super high value class, which then Blizzard even made something special in dungeons in order to, you know, to allow players to kind of do the rogue thing without a rogue, which essentially is what I forget what it was, the thing where you'd pass on to a different dimension and whatnot, and that was interesting. And there are some interesting mechanics here and there. I may be overgeneralizing whenever it comes to just talking about, oh, you just AoE them down and kill everything. But I always remember going back to the days of like Burning Crusade dungeons, and I know that a lot of people are going to say that's just nostalgia, dude. That stuff wasn't as fun as you are claiming it to be. And I'm left wondering, isn't it? And that is the question that I'm posing in this video, and that I would like to hear from people in the comment section down below. Because here's the thing, right? There's definitely different, the population of World of Warcraft has definitely changed. There's different people playing the game now than there were back then. And you can never really go back to the old days. That's never going to be a thing, right? But if you think about the population that is currently in World of Warcraft, it's not really going to be that many Zoomers, right? Because World of Warcraft as a game demands way more attention than a lot of other things that people could be doing. Like the people that are playing Fortnite, I would argue that like 90% of them are probably not going to be interested in playing World of Warcraft. Leave me a comment in the comments if you feel like I'm wrong there. But I feel like most of the audience that plays battle royales and stuff like that is much less commitment. I kind of feel like those types of people most times are not really going to be interested in playing something with as high of a commitment as World of Warcraft, because it's an MMO. You have to commit to it, you have to learn, particularly when it comes to doing stuff like Mythic Plus. Like even if they commit to playing World of Warcraft, most likely, committing to something like a Mythic Plus, having to learn roots, having to learn proper rotation, doing stuff like that, I don't think is going to be up their alley. Like I can see maybe some of those people coming in and doing like some PvP, some arenas and stuff like that, which I'm not going to say that, it's easier or anything like that, because I'm not particularly good at PvP or anything like that, never been. It's just a different type of gameplay, right? What I'm trying to get at is that those people that are interested in competitive games and faster paced games and all of this stuff, they're probably not going to be as interested in doing Mythic Plus or maybe even raiding or anything of that nature. And so that leaves us with the question, who are the people that are currently playing PvE World of Warcraft that are doing these raids, that are doing these instances? And are those people, like you guys that are watching this video, for instance, would you be interested in going back to like a slower pace of dungeons? I find myself often in a lot of video games just like wanting a slower experience. And I don't mean slower in terms of like, I want things to be slower because I can't keep up. No, I want things to be slower in terms of more methodical, more preparation, more planning, more of a thinking man's game as opposed to just like reactionary like we've been. Because I remember back when I started tanking in Wrath of the Lich King, I was like, this is way better. I remember thinking like this is way better. I don't have to worry about CC. I don't have to mark mobs. I just AoE everything down. I just pull everything. We AoE everything. This is great. This is friggin' fantastic. I love it. I remember thinking like that, right? But there's definitely something lost whenever you take that approach. Because think of, for instance, you guys, I don't know how many of you guys remember this. I personally used to have like key bindings for all the markers. Maybe some people still have key bindings for markers. I don't remember doing a lot of marking anymore whenever it comes to dungeons. I mean, I guess on higher keys of Mythic Plus, you'll mark like important targets and stuff like that if you're in a pug. But usually when I was doing Mythic Plus, my latest round of Mythic Plus was done with people on Discord, so we didn't even have to worry that much. But ultimately, back in Burning Crusade, right? You would actually mark things. I don't know if there's people that maybe never played, so you guys don't know how we used to do things, but we used to mark things, and before you would actually start a dungeon, you would explain to people, okay, moon is sleep, star is sap, square is frost trap, stuff like that, right? And then you'd mark the mobs, and CC would go off, and you'd decide, okay, how many mobs am I going to tank, right? So between every pack, I would make the decision as a tank. It's like, okay, I think my gear is good enough. I think DPS these guys are putting out is good enough, so we'll tank like 2 or 3 mobs, and we'll CC 2 other mobs. Now, this is still a very simplistic way of looking at things. I'm not saying, this is the ultimate end-all, be-all dungeon experience. Putting a couple of marks and mobs and, having people CC them, and that's the big deal. That's not what I'm talking about. I want more from a dungeon. I want dungeons to kind of feel like self-contained Dungeons and Dragons sessions almost. And I realize that for a lot of people, you hear something like that and you're like, I don't like Dungeons and Dragons, or, I'm not sure if I would have time to do something like that. And whenever the time argument is brought up, I'm always wondering, what is it that you need to do that you can't spare, like, I don't know, 30 minutes or however much we're going to be spending on a dungeon, 40 minutes, whatever. How are you playing an MMO, no less, like 15 minutes at a time? I don't think that's going to be a meaningful experience. I think you might get more value out of a different game, maybe even Monster Hunter, because you can do a hunt in 15 minutes and you can get the materials from a hunt in Monster Hunter, but you're not going to be able to really achieve much in a MMO if you're doing sessions of 15 minutes. If you're doing sessions of 30 minutes, I still feel like you're not going to really achieve that much. I feel like there can be activities where you might be able to do something like maybe go out, collect a couple of nodes or something, maybe do a couple of world quests or something like that. But I feel like committing to a dungeon should be something that takes a significant amount of time and that you should also be rewarded accordingly. But I also feel that there should be more to dungeons than simply AoEing a bunch of packs down and then killing a boss, and then AoEing a bunch of packs down and then killing a boss. And I know at this point some people are going to say, oh, Rurikhan, you're always talking so nicely about Final Fantasy XIV. Why don't you tell us about those dungeons? I mean, the formula for dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV, I think pretty much since Stormblood, maybe even since Heavensward, the formula is basically like pull 2 or 3 packs and then there's a wall so that you can't pull anymore. And then you AoE down that pack, and then you pull 2 or 3 more packs, and then there's another wall so that you can't pull anymore. And then you AoE those packs down, then there's a boss. See, that's the thing. I think that Final Fantasy XIV dungeons are fun like once or twice, and then you just do them for the rewards. It's not really like a big time investment or anything like that. See, in the case of 14, you can do a dungeon in 15 minutes. That's kind of like the design they've done. But even 14 is experimenting with harder dungeons now, which is pretty cool. You know, they got the Criterion dungeons coming up and all of that jazz, and I can't wait to test those out because I'm hoping that's going to be a more challenging experience than the dungeons that we currently have. But fundamentally, how would you guys feel about World of Warcraft actually changing the formula that they've been doing with dungeons and actually requiring players to maybe pay a little bit more attention, do a little bit more CC here and there, bring a couple of class tools to the whole thing? Because I personally found, I find myself missing that experience, and I'm curious if anybody else feels the same. If I'm just like, Rurikhan, you're just crazy. Who the hell wants to go back to having the sheep monsters and having to deal with that? And then there's also the fact that, but certain classes have CC, certain classes don't have CC. So then the classes that have CC will be more desirable than the classes that don't have CC. I don't have all the answers, right? I'm just posing the questions because I'm curious to see where the player base is at. And I understand that a lot of people on this channel maybe aren't even playing World of Warcraft currently. I think that's probably the smart thing to do. But let's say if you were to play World of Warcraft again, right, in the hypothesis, would you like to see, dungeons appealing more to class fantasy, right? Where each class has like a role to play and, there's just more things. Like actually Tol Barad has a bit of an example of that in the fact that rogues, they can open gates that give us certain shortcuts, which makes Rogue a more desirable class to have in a thing like this. Now, there's also, obviously, there was the blacksmith keys, and I think there was something also that scribes could do that would open doors. I don't remember how that worked. Like, it was like some open door enchantment or something that they'd be able to also open doors. But, like, having stuff like that in an instance, and maybe even having more, again, things that look like an adventure. One of the things that comes to mind, I don't know how many people did this quest, but again, in BFA, because as it turns out, despite the fact that I didn't care for BFA, I mean, like I said, the thing that pissed me off about BFA is obviously Azerite gear and the fact that that stupid mythic chest completely screwed me over. My character was logged out in front of the chest when I logged back in preparation for Shadowlands. My character was in front of the mythic chest, okay? But, stuff like that where you just have things that you do on the dungeon that maybe you wouldn't need a timer, right? Maybe we don't need a timer for this. Maybe this would be like a separate thing. Maybe there's even solutions that you can come up with where you could do a Mythic Plus dungeon without a timer. This was actually something that I've been thinking about as well. So, like, think about this. You have the timed version, and for starters, I've been a big supporter of Mythic Plus, essentially getting more loot, because I feel like just getting loot on the Great Vault is terrible. It's a terrible experience. I mean, Belilar has a whole last 30-minute video or whatever talking about even just like the psychology aspects of why having loot in a great vault is terrible. And again, like I said, my character, I logged out for the last time in front of the stupid vault because it's a stupid thing. But Bellylord talked about this in this video, how it's bad for psychology, and I myself just feel like you should get loot from the instances themselves, not at the end of the week from some stupid chest like this is a fucking mobile game. You're paying $15 to play this game a month. The loot should come from the fucking instances like a regular game, as opposed to having it feel like a free-to-play experience. And anyone that doesn't feel like the vault is a free-to-play experience, all I can tell you is that I kind of feel like you've already been conditioned at this point and it's far too late for you. But anyway, so imagine it like this. In my opinion, if you time an instance, if you time the Mythic Plus, you could potentially get like 3 chests. Let's talk about maybe at 10 plus keys. So before 10, you maybe get less chests or whatever, maybe 2 chests, maybe the regular ones, whatever. But like my idea was once you go above 10, you'd start getting more loot. And in my world, it would be like you time the instance, you get 3 chests. You don't time the instance, you get 1 chest. You do it without a timer, and you get 2 chests. And this is not like set in stone. It's just like an idea for people that, like me, don't care that much about the timer. I don't find the timer to be particularly engaging. I like taking my time with instances. I think it's more fun that way. And again, you could have instances that are more complex even than Mythic Plus that would have like different mechanics and stuff to them that would actually demand you to work as a team. Like even imagine an instance where you might have to split up your group and some people would have to do a different task somewhere and the rest of the group would have to do it. You know, think for instance the last mission of Mass Effect 2. I don't know how many of you guys played Mass Effect 2, right? But think about that. The last mission of Mass Effect 2 where you have to pick certain people to go do certain things. Again, I just want to shake things up for dungeons to make them more interesting as a gameplay experience, not necessarily as just something you go in and you AoE everything down and it's like whatever. And I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm a little bit rambly at this point. And I'm just asking, how would you guys feel about dungeons becoming not necessarily harder, but more complex? More self-contained adventures as opposed to the, you know, what has become the traditional dungeon experience of pulling as much as you possibly can, slaughtering everything in your way, and moving on. I don't know, I feel like I've talked too much already and maybe it's been a little bit too rambly because it's also late and I'm sleepy and also sleep deprived. So yeah, I'm gonna call it here. Let me know in the comment section how you guys feel about that, and let me know how you guys like this discussion, because there's a lot of mechanics in World of Warcraft that I would like to talk about as we make our way into Dragonflight, because obviously I don't have alpha access. I'm not going to be talking about the specifics of the alpha or what they're doing. I'm going to be talking about my experience with the game and the things that I feel that I've liked doing, and I feel that with the current, with the population that World of Warcraft draws in, them trying to appeal to more, faster and faster gameplay playstyles is eventually going to bite them in the ass. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm just off my rocker. Let me know in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong. Stay safe. Peace out.